Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today we are down to our final three roster breakdowns with the Texas Longhorns being our focus this afternoon. So, Texas, under Steve Sarkisian, they missed out in the playoff last season after a couple of bad losses, mainly that loss to Florida in the middle of the year, and now they're coming back for it all this year. The roster construction that Steve Sarkisian and his staff did is incredible. I went through the portal video already, and now for this whole roster breakdown, I think you guys will see why they're my pick to win the national championship this fall, which I know is Texas is always back, yada, yada, yada. I think this could really be the year that Texas is just different than the rest of the country. So let's go right through their roster, starting off with the obvious. Arch Manning is back at quarterback for the Longhorns at 6'4", 226. He's a junior this season. Obviously, started every game last year. He was dealing with foot issues a little bit last season, but also just the fact that it was his first time starting. And he had the expectations that he was going to be a number one overall pick immediately. It was never going to work out that way. I said it last summer. It was never going to work out that way. But you saw it last year. As the year went on, he got more and more comfortable. He got more and more effective. And now coming into this fall, he will be entirely healthy. This could be a Heisman year for Arch Manning and the Longhorns. But behind there for Arch is KJ Lacey, who is a 6-foot, 186-pound redshirt freshman. He completed only one pass last year in very limited action, but he is a four-star guy out of Alabama. Moving to the running back room, which could be one of the best in the SEC overall from top to bottom. Raleek Brown comes in there from Arizona State. He is 5'9", 191 as a senior. He played in 12 games last year for the Sun Devils, carried the ball 186 times, and ran it for over 1,100 yards, averaging more than 95 yards on the ground per game. And then Hollywood Smothers coming over from NC State, 5'11", 185 as a junior. He had 160 carries for over 900 yards and 6 scores last year. Also caught 37 passes for almost 200 yards and a touchdown. So Smothers and Raleek Brown, it's kind of like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are for the Lions, right? It's that kind of physical runner in Raleek Brown, and then Hollywood is a little more fluid, a little more sleek. There can be an elite duo together, and then the depth behind them is just as strong too. Derek Cooper is a true freshman 5-star. He's 6'1", 210. He was a consensus top 10 running back in his recruiting class. Then James Simon is back as a redshirt freshman, 5'11", 203. He carried the ball 17 times last year, had 3 appearances, but he was a consensus 4-star in the 2025 recruiting class. And Michael Terry is back as another redshirt freshman. He is 6'3", 227, so a much bigger body there in the backfield. Played in 2 games last year, but he was a 4-star in 2025 and was a consensus top 2 athlete in that recruiting class. So the running back for Texas, from top to bottom, is something serious. And moving on to the receiving room, because why not? They got Cam Coleman there, coming in from Auburn, 6'3", 200 pounds as a junior, started in all 12 games last year for the Tigers, obviously caught 56 passes, over 700 yards, and 5 scores. We all know who Cam Coleman is, and we all know how bad Auburn was last year. I don't need to sell anybody on why he might have the best year of any receiver in the sport. But even with Coleman there, you cannot forget about Ryan Wingo, who was back for his junior season, 6'2", 211, started in 12 games last year, did see action in all 13, caught 54 passes, over 800 yards, and 7 scores. And they also bring back Emmett Mosley V, who is 6'2", 190 as a junior. He played in 9 games last year, got 8 starts, caught 28 passes for over 400 yards and 3 scores. And then moving on to the depth in that receiver room, Sterling Burkhalter is coming over from Wake Forest. He is a 6'3", 192-pound senior who played in 13 games last year for the Demon Deacons, caught 30 passes for over 400 yards and 2 scores. They also have Kalik Lockett, who is back for his redshirt freshman season. He is 6'2", 186, played in just 5 games last year, but he was a 5-star recruit across the board in his recruiting cycle. And then Jermaine Bishop is a 6', 165 freshman who was a consensus top 5 athlete and a 5-star player in last year's recruiting class from his home state here in Willis, Texas. And then moving on to tight ends. This is kind of tricky because there are 2 guys in Amari Williams who's pictured and Nick Townsend. We don't really know who's going to be the number 1 guy here so far, but it seems like Winston has been the better receiving tight end so far. He is 6'1", 246 as a sophomore. Only caught 2 passes last year, but going through camp, he has been more impressive, and he's a former 4-star guy. And Nick Townsend, who is 6'3", 246, also as a sophomore. He played in 13 games last year, only had 2 catches as well. Now moving on to Texas's offensive line, which I don't really have a ton of questions about. There are some portal players that we'll talk about here in a second, but this is really what's going to be the make or break for if Texas can make the run that I believe they can this year. At left tackle, Trevor Gooseby, he is the known commodity, right? 6'7", 325 as a junior, started all 13 for him last year at left tackle. He is an NFL player. He is a known value. But here's an unknown, is Lawrence Seymour, who is a 6'2", 320-pound graduate transfer. He is coming over from Western Kentucky. He's not there yet. He's getting there next month. So he will have not had spring ball. He's going to have to get used to Texas, used to his teammates, used to that scheme pretty quickly. But he has played over 1,300 snaps in his career, so I'm not worried about his overall lack of experience, but he has much less time to adapt than other transfers on the offensive line. Connor Robertson is back for Texas at 6'4", 317. He is a senior, played in all 13 last year and got 8 starts. Brandon Baker at guard, 6'4", 305 pounds as a junior, had 11 starts last year at right tackle, so he might be moved around a little bit here on this offensive line this year, mainly because they bring in Melvin Siani, who was 6'6", 313 as a senior, coming in from Wake Forest, started in all 13 games. He was the 12th best blocker in the ACC per PFF last fall, and he allowed no sacks in 914 snaps. So there really aren't too many question marks about Texas's O-line, just some transfers. We'll see how they mesh together. But as long as that O-line can play up to their talent level, I don't really know how much really stops Texas's offense. But as high as I am on their offense, I think I'm higher on their defense because of both the personnel and also the staffing moves they brought in with Will Muschamp at DC and Mark Stoops there to just help out. But let's get into the personnel here, starting off the edge position with an absolute superstar in Colin Simmons. He is 6'3", 245 as a junior, just an absolute freak of an athlete. Made 12 starts last year, had 43 tackles for 15.5 tackles for loss, 12 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. That was as an underclassman. This guy's just a freak of an animal. He's unblockable, and across from him should, in all likelihood, be Lane Jackson, who was 6'5", 272 as a sophomore. He had 16 tackles, 2 TFLs, and 2 sacks last year, so his role will likely expand this fall. And then behind those two, Richard Wesley is in as a freshman. He is 6'4", 254. He was a 5-star on most sites. As a senior in high school, he had 12.5 TFLs, 8.5 sacks, 5 picks as an edge rusher, and a forced fumble. And then Zena Umeozulu is a 6'5", 265-pound sophomore who had 13 tackles, 3 TFLs, and 2 sacks last season. Moving inside now to D-tackle, they bring in Ian Jefferard, who is a transfer from Arkansas. He is 6'5", 378 as a senior. Started all 12 games for the Hogs last year, had 25 tackles, 4 TFLs, and a pass breakup. And they return Hiro Kanu, who's a 6'5", 321-pound senior, who had 30 tackles, 4 TFLs, and 2 sacks last year. So some really experienced guys, 2 seniors there, starting off as your D tackles. And the depth in that room is Murad Watson, who is 6'3", 333. He had 6 starts last year, record 23 tackles for 1.5 TFLs, also a sack and a half. And then Alex January is a 6'5", 312-pound junior who saw decent action last season, had 2.5 TFLs, 1.5 sacks, and a fumble recovery. Moving back to linebacker, when you lose a guy like Anthony Hill, you would normally expect your linebacker room to take a step back just by default. I think Texas found a way to get better. They bring back Ty Anthony Smith, who is a 6'1", 205-pound junior, played in all 12 games, only had 1 start last year, but he had 60 tackles, 5.5 TFLs, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 picks. Just ultra productive. And they also portaled in the best linebacker out there in Rasheem Biles coming over from Pitt. He is 6'1", 220 as a senior. Started all 10 games, that he played last year for the Panthers, had 101 tackles, 17 TFLs, 4.5 sacks, 6 pass breakups, 2 picks, 2 forced fumbles. Those two, Ty Anthony Smith and Rasheem Biles, the amount of production from just those two is absurd. It's just crazy. And then behind those guys, you have Brad Spence, who is a senior at 6'2", 242. He had 6 TFLs, 3 sacks last year. Justin Cryer comes over from Florida State. He is 6'1", 246 as a senior. In 12 games last year, he racked up 5 tackles for loss and a sack. And then Tyler Atkinson is another 5-star true freshman. He's 6'1", 216 coming out of Georgia. He had 25 TFLs and 10 sacks as a senior in high school. Moving back to the secondary, a name that you've got to get used to is Bo Masco. He is 5'11", 190 as a senior. He's coming over from Rutgers. He was all Big Ten honorable mention last fall, started all 12 games for the Scarlet Knights, had 48 tackles, a pick, 4 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles. This guy has star potential. He really does, especially on a Texas defense that's going to have the pass rush, right, and the strength in the box that Texas has. The corner should be pretty free, so watch out for Bo Masco this year. They also have Cade Phillips back, who is 6'1", 194 as a sophomore. Started 3 games last year, had 22 tackles, but he is a former 5-star guy back there in that secondary. They also have Grayson Littleton coming back, who is a 6', 185-pound sophomore, who had 47 tackles, 4 TFLs, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 picks last fall for the Longhorns. Kobe Black is back as a 6'2 junior. He had 15 tackles last year. So is Warren Roberson, who is a 6' junior, had 19 tackles. And Wardell Mack is a 6' sophomore, who is another former 5-star guy, had 6 tackles and a pick last season. And then moving back to the safety room. Jelani McDonald is the headliner of this room. He is 6'2", 200 as a senior. Started in all 13 games for Longhorns last year. Had 80 tackles, 4 TFLs, a fumble recovery, and 3 picks. And also Xavier Filsaime is ready to grow into that starting role. He is 6'1", 198 as a junior. Former 5-star guy. He was a depth piece last season. Had 16 tackles. I do expect Filsaime to really level up his game this fall. Also, Derek Williams Jr. is in that room. He is 6'2", 193 as a junior. Had 23 tackles last fall. And Jonathan Cunningham is a 6'2", 192-pound redshirt freshman who racked up 3 tackles in 5 games last year. And then at kicker, they went to Memphis and portaled in Gianni Spedic, who is 6'3", 223. He's a senior. He went 14 of 17 on field goals last year and 49 of 49 on extra points. So there's Texas's roster. The amount of pure talent that this team has, I don't think it's touched by the rest of the country. When it comes to both skill positions, NFL potential on both sides of the lines. You have elite linebackers, 2 elite linebackers, and then shut down corners who are ball hawks and hard hitters. And I do believe that we get Arch Manning this year in the form that everyone rushed to assume he was immediately going to have last fall. And I understand the critiques about Steve Sarkisian. Can he win big games? Can his offenses really step up? Can he not choke when he gets down to the goal line? No coach has ever won a championship until they've done it. Have not won is so much different than cannot win. Steve Sarkisian absolutely can win. He just hasn't yet. I think that this could be the year for Sark and these Texas Longhorns to officially be back after we've been saying it for all these years. But if you have been enjoying all this college football content and you want some more SEC previews every single day of the summer, subscribe to me here. Follow me on Twitter. We got 2 more roster breakdowns. Texas A&M is coming tomorrow, the Aggies. So we'll get into all that. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.